Well, I'm very excited to be chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sarah and Reverend Shawn.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for people who may not be familiar, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
I'm Sarah Amos, and I am the host of a new podcast called Tough Cookie, the Wally Famous Amos Story. I am a producer and a journalist by trade in my day job, and I'm also the daughter of Wally Amos, hence the podcast. But most importantly, for today's purposes, and I'm going to toss it over, I am also the sister of Reverend Shawn Amos.
I'm Sarah's sister, Shawn.
You're Sarah's sister,
I'm Sarah's
Shawn?
brother, Shawn. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm her sister. I have a strong feminine side.
It's true.
I am Sarah's older brother, Shawn. People call me Rev. I'm known as the Reverend Shawn Amos because I'm a blues singer, and I perform under the name the Reverend Shawn Amos. So the longer I've done it, some people call me Shawn, some people call me Rev, and depending on what you call me is a giveaway of how long you've known me. And I'm also, I am the youngest son of Wally Famous Amos. We have two older brothers, and yeah, that's me.
Beautiful. So I love that transition to throwing to your brother, Sarah. I wonder if you can all get us started by just talking to us a little bit about what your relationship was like when you were younger children.
Actually, so Shawn and I am from my dad's third marriage, and I'm 15 years younger than Shawn. And my relationship with each of my siblings was a little bit different. And growing up, I was definitely the closest to Shawn. In the podcast, I jokingly refer to all of my siblings as kind of the guest stars in the sitcom of my life because they kind of would come in and out. And Shawn, I would say Shawn probably was like less of a guest star and more of a recurring character. He was not a
Thank you.
regular on the sitcom, but he showed up with enough regularity that we always had a relationship that I knew was there. But in the younger years of my life, definitely, I think if you gut checked asked me, oh, do you like, how would you describe yourself? I think mostly I would still, even then, describe myself as an only child. It's not till I've gotten older that I have started always describing myself as someone who has siblings.
It's interesting. I was living in Hawaii when Sarah was born. So I moved to Hawaii, and I'm so bad with years, but our father, and that's interesting too. You'll notice there's times when we say our father, and there's times when we say my father, and that's indicative of the kind of the newness of seeing ourselves as having this sort of shared experience. But our father asked me to move to Hawaii with Sarah's mother. Christine, my stepmother, before Sarah was born. And so I lived with them for a bit of time before Sarah was born. And when she was born, I was really excited to be a big brother because I'd been the youngest until then. And my experience with our older siblings was similar to Sarah's, where they were the guest stars in my life. And only they came in and beat the shit out of me and then split. And so it was a very different kind of experience. And so I was really excited to be a big sibling, but also have a presence in her life. And I really was looking forward to sort of crafting some kind of ongoing relationship. And it didn't happen because of my own troubles with our father. And I ended up leaving Hawaii and sort of went down my own, my own journey. So it got in the way. But it was always really important for me to not disappear on Sarah. And to have her know that I was there, even if it wasn't regularly. And I think over the years, we've just gotten closer and closer and closer and closer, where I think we rely on each other in a lot of really fundamental ways.
So I want to get the kind of family dynamic straight. So Shawn or Reverend Shawn, you are the only child of your mother and your father.
Correct.
And then
yeah.
there are two older brothers who have your father and another mother.
Correct.
And then Sarah, you are your father and your mother.
Correct. And then there were two wives after my mother who had
Okay.
no children. And the last wife, he married, divorced, and remarried again. So it's a lot of family dynamics.
Yeah,
Your
yes.
typical American
Okay.
family.
I mean,
Super
families
typical.
look all kinds of different ways for sure.
Hmm.
That's definitely for sure. Got it. Okay. So it sounds like you had been excited to be a big brother, and then things happened, and you actually were not there to kind of be the big brother that you dreamed about. But Sarah described you as kind of being a regular character. So at what frequency were you all seeing one another?
You grab that, Sarah.
It was like every couple of years. I remember, I have like, the thing that I will say that was great about Shawn is I have, when he did come to visit, I have like very specific memories. Like he took me to an Alanis Morissette concert when I was like 13. And when he would come to town, he would always bring a new girlfriend. And I was always very excited about the girlfriends, and they were always very cool. And so like I have these memories of when he would come to town, he would really be there, and he called a bit more than the other brothers. Uh, I think also just maybe dad was more still active in your drama, Shawn. So I think part of it also is I just like had a better front row seat sometimes to some of the drama going on with you, maybe than Michael and Gregory. But like there was a presence there. And then it was when I went to college that our relationship started to shift. And it's because both of us really made a concerted effort. I chose USC in Los Angeles in part because it was very close to my grandparents, but also in part because it was close to Shawn. And we really made a concerted effort to see each other on a very regular basis, even though I was a college freshman and sophomore, right, and had this busy life. But like we really from then on always put our relationship as a priority, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw it as a big victory when she decided to come to L.A. for college. I'm like, right on, we're in the same town. Yeah, so that was a big deal for me, and I didn't want to. I want to leverage that opportunity, as much as possible. So, and I was starting a young family, me and my own family around that time, or pretty soon thereafter. So, she had a place to go to, and she was sort of witnessing, the launch of my own family, and so it was a good time. It was a good time. I think that was definitely a turning point, and I could offer some, dispense some brotherly advice from time to time, and we also were starting to choose similar, lines of work, and that we're both getting in the entertainment space, and we've always been wired really similarly. We're both have our father's work ethic, and we really sort of value the notion of just digging in deep to our work, and being pretty fearless about throwing ourselves into new spaces. And so we had a lot in common, and we had a lot to talk about, and we had a lot of advice to share with each other, and sort of were each other's. We've always been really big cheerleaders for each other. And this
It's
podcast.
actually
Oh, good.
it's really funny. I have to say this because people often assume, even though we're from different moms, that we're actually from the same mom. Because Shawn and I are so kind of wired the same in our work ethic, in our OCD. We actually look very similar, to the point where people often will actually ask us like, oh, like you guys must be really close in age. Are you guys twins? And it is like a real testament to how well Shawn Amos is aging that people often think that 15-year age gap doesn't exist at
I
all,
love that.
and we are just twin siblings. I've gotten that more than once from people, so I want to
Never
go on
gets
the
old.
record as
Never
saying
gets old.
Shawn Amos's skincare routine. But it's such a testament to like some of its nature and some of its nurture that like our mothers are very, very different people, and our upbringing was very different, even though we had the same father. But something about our personalities are just like in lockstep with each other in a
Yeah.
way that kind of drives the rest of the family insane.
Okay, okay. I feel like I want to hear more about that. But I also want to hear what kinds of things have really helped you to cultivate this close relationship as adults, because that is a very intentional choice, and it sounds like something that was important on both of your parts. What things have helped you to really be intentional about creating this relationship with one another?
We're looking at each other. We're staring at each other. Who goes first?
And
You go. Yeah, go.
I was gonna say, I actually say this podcast. Look, it hasn't always been perfect. I think we we ebb and flow. I think we were really close during college. Then I moved when I was in college. Then I moved to New York, and we probably, kind of distance of physical space. Kind of we grew apart a little bit. And when my parents were going through a divorce, and Shawn was dealing with stuff with his own family, and I talk about this in the podcast. Like I really took a step back from everyone in the family and was just kind of like, I'm going to do my own thing. Like, you guys all figure out your stuff. And I'm not saying that was the right decision, but it was the decision I made. And then, circumstances brought us back together, and Shawn and I actually worked together for several years. But then as things continue to, like, we have fallen out again and come back together again. And I think the podcast in a lot of ways has actually re-cemented things for the two of us, because I think part of, and I've never said this to Shawn, so we'll see if he agrees with me or not. I think part of what we started to struggle with in the past couple of years was it was just really hard for, I think, both of us to have an honest conversation with the other one about what we were feeling. And I think that was somewhat true for like a lot of people in my family, it turns out. And, for whatever reason, us Amoses are wired that if you put a microphone in front of us, we are very transparent people. And so I think a lot of things and conversations that we as a family should have had over the last several years, we had during the making of this podcast. And part of that was also just our dad passing away, right? And what that brings out of people. But I do think in the last year, Shawn and I have become a lot closer because of the process of dealing with our dad's death, but also making this podcast and really having to go through the past and talk about things that aren't even part of the podcast, but are related to feelings that came up during the recording of the podcast. And it's one of the things that I am most grateful for in actually even making it.
What kept us together over the years was work. We are a family of workaholics, and we are a family who finds it most we're most comfortable dealing with each other when work is sort of the connective tissue, when that's providing the lubricant. And so a lot of what kept us in touch and a lot of things that we're vibing on and feel like we're moving our relationship forward and bonding us was work. So like Sarah said, we worked together in the same company for a while, and we had projects, and if there's anything project related that Sarah needed a gut check on, still to this day, she calls me up, vice versa, and so that's like a real strong muscle for us. I think that the flip side of it, and Sarah alluded to it, was that I don't think that existed solely to avoid other stuff, but it made it easy to avoid other stuff. And so there was definitely some personal resentments and sort of misunderstandings and hurt feelings that were building up over the years. And it wasn't even to say, like, on some level we knew it was happening and we made a conscious decision not to talk about it. I think that in some respects we're so emotionally underdeveloped that we didn't even know, it was happening. We should be speaking about it. It wasn't like we're consciously like, oh, that bitch, I'm not going to talk to her anymore. It was just something we couldn't even identify within ourselves. And yeah, the death of a parent will give you a lot of gifts as well as, do a number on your head. And when our father died, and even I was even before that. When his dementia came on, and it was clear that Sarah and I were going to step up and do our best to manage that to the best of our abilities. That was really in the beginning of, we have like a personal relationship here now, instead, in addition to like working relationships with each other, and that was the beginning of both having different types of conversations that we didn't have, and also working extra hard to avoid conversations at the same time. And so I think, I would view that moment as like the turning point where, okay, we're talking about stuff other than work now, and our relationship is about more than just our common love and our common approach to our professional lives. We've got this personal thing to deal with, and that was a bit of a juggling act, I think, for us. And I don't know and it probably wasn't sustainable until his death. I think if he were still alive, we might have still been dancing around some stuff we shouldn't have been dancing around. And,
Yes.
and then he passes away and, the ball just shatters to the ground, right? And so you've got a lot of stuff to now that you just can't avoid talking about anymore. And her podcast has absolutely, been a gift, and a major vehicle for a lot of healing, not only between us, but within the whole family.
So one of the things that families often struggle with is caregiving, right? So somebody becomes ill in the family and there's this discussion or maybe lack of discussion amongst the siblings about like who is stepping up and like what everybody's responsibility is going to be. And it sounds like you said, Reverend Shawn, that you and Sarah kind of said like, okay, this is going to be on us. I wonder, what was that conversation like with your siblings, or was there a conversation around where everybody's responsibility was going to be in terms of caregiving?
I think that we talked about at the outset, our typical American family that has, 4 siblings from 3 marriages, and I think that the challenges of a family like that, there's no family meetings, there's no like sitting around the table together, and that doesn't exist at all. So I think it's I'm going to set Sarah up now. I think Sarah has had something to prove for a long time, and she talks about this in the podcast. She had something to prove as being, the best kid, and by best I mean the kid who's gonna, not who's gonna step up for her father despite whatever, challenges she may have had with him. Who's, my brothers and I have all had periods of time where we have not spoken with our father, where the pain or the disruption in our relationship has been too great, and Sarah was going to be sort of like, the perfect kid, and I think being the perfect kid meant there was no doubt she wasn't going to do anything but step up, and sort of take this role. And I think to some degree joined in her in that, because it was the big brother role that I wanted to play. It's like going back to the beginning. Like I'm going to be her big brother, and I'm not going to let her go through anything alone that I can help. And she's got a husband, she's got a family of her own, but there's a role of a big brother, and so I viewed, I sort of put my feelings aside, to sort of to make sure that she wasn't doing this alone. But I think a lot of it was fueled by her wanting to play this part that she's been wanting to play for a long time. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, look, I think this is one of the main reasons I wanted to make the podcast, and what I hope is one of the things that people find the most useful about it. And actually, I've already heard from people listening to just the first couple episodes, which doesn't even get like this part of the family drama really comes towards the end of the podcast in episodes 5 and 6. But I think Shawn is spot on, right? I had always kind of played the role of dutiful daughter, and in my mind, being a good caregiver, being a good daughter, being a good family member meant that you told a person you love them, that you always took their calls, that you tried to provide for them financially, right? That you made the choices that made sure they were okay. And I think in the process of making this podcast, I've learned 2 very important things. One is that, yes, all of those things are important, but if there isn't real intention and meaning and emotional connection behind it, then it is also to some degree performative. And when your parent passes away, you can feel that you've done all the right things. But if you don't have the conversations, if you don't really work on your relationship with them, then you might realize that you gave a form of caregiving, but you did not perhaps give exactly the right form of caregiving for what you intended or want once they have passed. I think the second thing that I learned in making this podcast, and in just in the last several years of our lives in dealing with what we dealt with my dad and our family, is that we are so good at the early stages of life. There are a million manuals on how to raise a baby. You can find 37 different like technique books alone on sleep training, but you can barely find 5 well-recommended books on how to take care of an elderly patient, an elderly parent with dementia. And I think like we as a society focus so much on the early years of life that we have completely forgotten about the later years. And it is hard to take care of an aging parent. And it is hard to suddenly find yourself in the role of parenting your own parent. And it is hard for your parent to suddenly be parented by their children. That is a hit to an ego and a self that, like, I now, in putting myself in my dad's shoes, like, understand is difficult and is not something that everyone is going to accept with grace. And how everyone deals with being a caregiver is different, and how two of our brothers needed to deal with it both emotionally and financially was very different than what Shawn and I could give. And we all just kind of accepted that from each other. People just aren't prepared for parents getting old, and they're not prepared for how much work it's going to be, both financially, both just labor-wise, and then also emotionally. This podcast, for me, has allowed me to let go, at least in part, not entirely yet, of some of the guilt I realized I was holding when our dad died. I felt about some of the choices I made along the way that were choices that I, at the time, thought I was making with the best of intentions, but in retrospect realized I was making, for not always the right reason. And so it has been a process working through what was the process of caregiving.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one that's so spot on. The word performative is so perfect, right? Like what you do sort of as a performative act versus, you're doing it, like giving has so many different layers to it, right? And another thing, as she was talking, as you were talking, Sarah, I was thinking about is just any unresolved baggage you got with your parent will come back to bite you in the ass when they're towards the end of their lives. Yeah. So if you've got unchecked, things you're pissed off about or hurt about or, or abandonment issue, whatever it is, it all comes right to the surface, and it starts to inform your caregiving on some level, whether you know it or not. And so when people talk about, the care that caregivers need, and a lot of that emphasis is on making sure that they're eating properly themselves and getting proper rest and getting a break, and sort of the physical, grueling nature of it. It's the emotional piece too. It's like you're sitting there next to an 80-something-year-old parent, and as you're sitting next to him, you're a 5-year-old kid sitting next to him, and that's deep. And so it is the emotional and the psychological support too that's needed along the way, because I think there are certainly times I think when we were absolutely doing our best, but we were probably at times doing our best as kids, versus adults, because we were thrown back, to an older time that we hadn't really dealt with.
We have a few quick social questions. Who makes the best version of the original Famous Amos cookie recipe?
Oh, that's easy. That's Christine Harris Amos, who is my stepmother and Sarah's mother.
Yes, she as many cookies as our dad made over the years, that woman, they were married for 30 years, she made even more. And she can make them in her sleep to this day. I will say, Shawn, I give credit, is much more of a cookie connoisseur than I, because A, I don't eat chocolate, which is the great irony of my life.
Spoiler alert. Yep.
So I don't even eat the cookies. But B, Shawn is pickier. Shawn is much more focused on size and consistency of the cookie than I am. So I would say of the two of us, Shawn is more of the cookie connoisseur than me.
I'm dedicated to keeping the personality of the original Famous Amos cookie alive.
I love that. I love that. Now, this is not a question I had prepared to ask, but is the family recipe still a family recipe? Is it something that you are passing down?
No, as I say in the podcast, and has really blown people's minds, it is largely just the recipe on the back of the Nestle Toll House bag of chocolate chips. We have a couple of tweaks, and we're going to keep those tweaks to ourselves, because otherwise, what is the point of being friends with us if you can't get good cookies?
Although I did write a book. Although I did write a book, and the recipe's in the back of the book. But
well, then there we go. So go buy Shawn's book or become friends with one of us, and we'll make you the original recipe.
There we go. Okay. So, what's one thing that your dad always said that stuck with you?
Oh my God, just one thing? Whoa.
Just one for the purposes of this.
Oh, I mean, I named one of the podcasts after something that he attributed to a friend of his, but he used to use all the time in motivational speeches, and there is both good in it and bad in it, which is when you're going through hell, don't stop to take pictures. And there's a lot of truth to that, and there's a lot of good you can take from that. But also, it turns out if you don't take any pictures or remember the experience, you don't learn from it either. And that can come back to bite you in the ass, as it did with Mr. Wally Amos in his later years.
Mine is faith, focus, and follow through. He would repeat that over and over again. It takes three things to be successful: faith, focus, and follow through.
What's one creative idea you've pitched to your sibling that they totally rejected?
Man, I've had a lot of crazy ideas over the years. But.
Greg, at one point, Shawn wanted to open there was a donut store idea that he had that I feel like I vetoed early on in college or something.
That was a good one. I think the most recent one was my the roast I wanted to have for my 60th birthday.
Oh, that's true. Shawn wanted to do a roast for his 60th birthday with all of his family and friends, and I hard vetoed that. That was like an adamant gut check, immediate veto, like without even thinking about it. I don't know I don't know if I'm the play it safe sibling.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, this podcast is actually the craziest idea I've ever had. Like I am a play it safe 401k. I like health insurance, take no risks girl. So this podcast is really out on a limb for me.
It is. This is like wild Sarah right here.
This is crazy
this is
Sarah.
wild. This is as wild as it gets.
What's one moment that made you proud of your sibling?
It's not one moment because it is all the time. Anytime I see Shawn perform, I'm very proud of him. I think a lot of people like to say that they're musicians and performers, and a lot of people get up on stages. That does not mean they are good at it. And there's nothing I love more than taking a friend who has never seen my brother perform to see him perform for the first time, because everyone comes away from it and is just like, holy shit, your brother's amazing. And I'm always so proud in that moment. Because he really is just like a magnetic force on the stage. And I am always very, very proud when I take someone to go see the Reverend Shawn Amos.
Thanks, sis. Oh God, I'm so proud of Sarah in so many ways. I mean, I've had so many moments. I've been seeing her. She's produced so much great TV documentaries and shorts and features. And every time I go to a screening of hers, lately she's been putting herself in front of the camera more, and that makes me really proud. And seeing her, I have a funny story. I think we did our first interview for her podcast, and she was so in her producer head, and she was like, look at everyone, and is the volume up on that, and did you catch that? And I'm like, dude, you're the talent now. You gotta be the talent, and she has become talent, and she's really good talent, and so I'm really proud of her for making that transition, and I'm just proud of this podcast, man. I mean, she just because it channels all the skills that she's had. I've watched her develop over the years. Her as a producer, her as a really masterful storyteller, her as just a convener of people and processes, but now on top of it, she's had to be a storyteller in a different way, and she's had to make herself vulnerable and be the vehicle that draws people in, not just sort of provide the vehicle for other people to do the drawing in. She has to be the one to do it herself, and she's totally risen to the occasion. It's been really a wonderful thing to watch.
What's something that you feel like you've learned from Sarah that has changed the way you see the world?
Our family has never been so good at commitment. Yeah, and and Sarah's commitment to her marriage, to her relationship with her husband, and to creating a family life when she had no real good examples of that herself, growing up, has been really beautiful to watch. It's funny, earlier in the interview you said, she said, she's been married for 20 years. And in my head, I was like, what? 20 years? She's been married for 20 years? She's only 20 years old. But that is, I'm just astounded by that. That she's created the family that she always wished she could have.
You both have referenced the issues that you feel like really came to a head after your father's passing that you, Sarah, talked about feeling like has helped you to become closer. Is there any conversation or maybe difficult conversation that you all had that you feel like really led to like, oh, this unlocked a new level to our relationship that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
I mean, actually, and look, you'll hear this conversation play out in the last episode of the podcast, which really deals with the end of our dad's life. I think it was really important. It was really helpful for me to talk to my brothers about how I was frustrated when our dad was in a coma and was in the ICU and I was there by myself. And it wasn't me saying I'm mad at you and I want you to apologize, but it was me feeling better just being able to voice that by being there and being by myself and understanding why they weren't there for a variety of reasons. It did still take me back to being that little girl who was growing up in Hawaii by herself and like felt like she kind of had family but kind of didn't, right? And it wasn't, again, it wasn't about needing anyone to say anything or apologize or change anything, but it was just really nice to be able to voice that, have them hear it, and like have that just be a real conversation that we could have and sit in and like experience together. That was really key to bringing us all closer.
We're still learning, and not even still, I think we're just now learning how to be a family. I think we have this is very new for all of us, because we all grew up in three, because our older brothers are part of the same, they're not the same biological mother. We four kids grew up in three separate homes. Is only children, and like Sarah said perfectly at the top of this thing, we were all guest stars in each other's lives, and this idea of what family means is a new concept. And we've all made our attempts to start our own families, to have our do-overs, or bring into our lives as adults what we didn't have as children, to varying degrees of success. But as far as each other, this blood family, it's new, and so we're still figuring it out. And I think there's a lot of only children act in a certain way, right? and so undoing those kinds of habits, and the idea, and it's in Sarah's podcast. Like we had a father who, by his own admission, put himself first and put his career first and put his desires first, as many successful people do, as many driven people do. Of all career types and all, race, creed, and nationalities. But you learn from that, right? You learn, how to throw in the towel when things get rough, and you learn how to have it be okay if you're going to, put your thing above someone else's, and how to dip out when things get a little, uncomfortable. And I think we're all learning how to trust that we will all be there for each other, regardless of how tough it gets, and regardless of how tough the conversation gets, and that we can have tough conversations and still be okay. That's new. That's new for us.
Reverend Shawn, you described kind of being a workaholic as a family trait, right? Like that is something that is really a value that has become a part of your family. But I
Not
also
always
hear
a
you
value,
saying
not always valuable, but
not always valuable, but definitely there. But I also hear you saying that, that dad kind of shared like, hey, this kind of was my priority. I wonder what hearing him talk about that has maybe, if anything, has it shifted your relationship to work? For both of you, given that you kind of see maybe some of the not so great sides of kind of work always being the priority.
yeah, I think we're still struggling. I mean, Sarah and I are so wired to some. If there's any one way in which we're the most similar, it's this. We're both. There's a great moment in her podcast when her husband Greg talks about Sarah always being on her phone, at events and not being present, and how Sarah, and as he is saying it to Sarah, Sarah's like realizing this in real time, like it never even dawned on her until this moment. I had the exact same moment. Mine wasn't recorded for a podcast, so it's it's a safe space, man. Yeah, it's a safe space. It's a space where we can control things. It's a space where we feel like we're being of service. And it's one of the great, it's one of the sort of most insidious isms, right? Because if you're if you have alcoholism or drug addiction, it's clearly, it's obvious how it's going to screw things up. The evidence is all over the place. But if you're a workaholic, hey, you're providing for your family. This is how it pays for the vacations and the rent and the blah blah blah. So it's a hard one to give grief about on some level, right? But it's a great way to avoid stuff. It's a great way to avoid the hard stuff. And so I am still a recovering workaholic, for sure. I mean, I'm talking to you right now from a airport lounge where I left home at 7:00 last night, before my daughter went to bed, and I'm like did a meeting this morning. I'm flying back home so I can hopefully catch her before she goes to bed, and that's like progress for me, right? But we run hard, and old habits die hard, and I think we may be fighting it till the day we die. I'm being pessimistic about it, but I think, yeah. What do you think, my workaholic sister?
I think actually one interesting really thing is I don't think our dad instilled in us and talked to us about the importance of working hard and doing your best. But so much of what we learned from him in terms of a workaholic nature was never a conversation we had with him. It is what we saw, right? He traveled 75% of the year that I knew him when I was a kid in Hawaii. Most of my memories of him were picking him up from the airport or dropping him off at the airport. So it starts less with even the conversations you have and more with the actions you show. And your kids pick that up from day one. And Shawn is spot on. And look, it is one of the things I am most grateful for in the podcast, but certainly not one of the things I set out to discover when I started, is how much of me how much I was turning into my father without me even realizing it, right? And it took my lovely, patient, wonderful husband and others to start to describe me back to myself and realize, oh, wow, there's a lot of Wally in here inadvertently. And look, having a strong work ethic is great. I credit my dad, and I think all of us would credit our dad with our ability to be comfortable as public speakers, to have a desire to be successful, to be good in a room. But there is a balance that you should strive for. And so I think, in the last 6 months or so, I think about it every day. And actually, I think there are work opportunities that a year ago I would have jumped at, that I would turn down now, because I know that they will affect my family in a way that might be too much of a toll on it for what I now want. But it is an everyday conversations. Shawn is spot on. It is an everyday conversation of me checking myself, and often it is my 9-year-old having to say, "Oh, is mom on her cell phone again?"
Yeah.
Often how it
And,
happens.
and you want the hit, man, right? I mean, it's like it's like we're all, and this is a societal thing, right? We're all just wired for more and more and more and more and more. And Sarah's made this podcast, and it's a beautiful piece of work. And of course, she's going to do everything she can do to promote it, and she should. And so and you get trained to think like every offer you get is the last offer that may come around, and you got to jump at everything. And we're just conditioned to say yes to everything. And if we don't say yes, they may not ask you again. It may not happen again. That's a broad struggle. But yeah, I think it's a daily negotiation. It is a daily negotiation.
So, Sarah, you have kind of talked about there being a family culture of not talking about things, publicly. Yet you have now, it seems, convinced your brothers to do this very public podcast. Was that a hard sell? And talk about like how the podcast and the making of the podcast has impacted your relationship with your siblings.
It was not a hard sell at all, and I am very grateful, and will always appreciate that fact. I called each of my brothers individually and asked them if they were cool with me doing this, and I called my mom too, and I said if everyone isn't okay with this, I won't do it. Everyone was entirely supportive from the first moment. And Shawn was so supportive that he also provided his deep catalog of music, which is actually what the entire podcast is scored to. And the theme song is one of my favorite songs by Shawn. So Shawn went above and beyond in helping. I think this podcast only worked if everyone in the family was open to it and willing to be a part of it. Because at the end of the day, this was as much about kind of helping cement the right type of legacy for not just our dad, but our family, as it was about me just working through stuff. And I can't work through stuff if no one in the family wants to work through it with me. Then it's just me talking into a void, and God bless, no one needs that. Everyone was spot on from day one. And then it was really just about doing the work, right? And digging in and having the conversations. And again, that was really my family stepping up and not just having to what we were talking about, the performative conversation, right? There's a version of these interviews that could have been really just surface and really just like, let's talk about the things that are already out there. Let's talk about the polite stuff. But instead, like, all of my family really went to places that were uncomfortable and talked about things that have hurt and chaos and trauma associated with them, and did so in beautiful ways, and that is a huge gift that they all graciously gave to me.
Yeah, it's there's such a thing. Yeah, there's such a media landscape now that rewards and presumes that these types of behind the scenes revelations will all be exploitative, or it's about settling scores or retribution or this kind of thing, or that the motives are about money or about score settling, and it's such a tribute to our father that, like, none of his sins are so great that we don't all want to be standing together and saying what an amazing dude he was, and that he had his he had his challenges like we all do. Some of them are so easy to understand if you know anything about Black America and if you know anything about men in Black America. There's a great phrase I learned about we are guilty but not to blame. And he is guilty of much. But if you know anything about his life and where he came from, he is so not to blame. And I think the greatest testament to him is that these 4 kids from 3 marriages, consider themselves family and wanted to come together and tell a story about their father that would, heal themselves and hopefully, help others heal. And it's just, to me, Sarah has put together like the greatest tribute possible to him.
Thanks, Shawn.
So
It's also funny. I want to say, I think it's important. Like, we're a very funny family. And so I think we've talked a lot about the emotions and the struggles, and all of that is very real. But we are also a hilarious bunch of people. And so and we honor our dad, who was also very funny when he wanted to be, in this podcast. So like it is a mix of tears and laughter in a way that like is what I love about the Amos family. Like we can all cry one moment and then bust out laughing the next, and that is what I think a great family is.
Yeah, it's really about resilience. I mean, he was a resilient dude, for sure. I think Black Americans are some of the most resilient people on earth, and I think that we are a profoundly resilient family, and I think that should be, hopefully that's all of service to people.
So Sarah, I read a piece from you, and you both have already talked about how therapeutic it was to complete the podcast, but you talked about like, oh, these are probably also things I should be talking to my therapist about. And I'm curious about the role that therapy has played in both of your maybe individual lives, but maybe even in your relationship as siblings.
Yeah, Sarah, talk about the role therapy has played in your life.
So I can now very firmly say I am finally going to therapy.
Oh! Breaking news! Breaking news on the Dr. Joy podcast. Sarah Amos finally is going to fucking therapy.
I'm dabbling. Look, in the first episode of the podcast very much ends with me asking my husband, "Do you think I should go to therapy?" And him trying politely to be like, "Yes." And
For the love of God, please.
So now I'm going to a therapist.
And have you actually made an appointment with a therapist?
I've had several appointments already.
Really?
I've had 3 appointments already.
Oh, yeah.
I have my next appointment on Friday.
Dude.
And
Nice.
I don't know, man. I'm at the beginning of this journey, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes, and how I feel it's going to help me. But I'm very proud of myself that like I've gotten to this point in the journey. Also, and this is like a testament to how much more developed my 9-year-old daughter is than I am. I told her, I was like, I've made an appointment to go see a therapist. And she goes, "Woo, good for you. I've already been seeing one." Like she was so deeply unimpressed with me making an appointment. She was like, "Okay, good for you." But
quintessential New York child.
Yeah, I am happy I'm doing it. I think it's going to be great for me. I should have done it sooner. I fully admit it. And people should not be afraid of therapy. Or more importantly, people should make time for therapy. That was my thing. I was never afraid of it. It was just my workaholic nature. No, I really do think it was my workaholic nature. It was like, I know what's wrong with me. I don't need someone to fix it. I am fully functional without fixing it. This is too low of a priority. And I now recognize that like that may not be healthy.
Yeah, that's also not called workaholism.
Shawn, what's your relationship with therapy?
Long and hard. Long, hard, arduous, and I'll be back tomorrow.
We love a standing appointment.
And when you've got a father like mine and a mother like mine, therapy is the first, second, and last destination. So yes, lots of therapy that is just been the essential glue to hold me together over the years, for sure.
So I'm aware, as you both were talking, that, of course, sibling relationships is a special kind of relationship, but I think that cousins are also a very special relationship. So I'd love to hear, maybe how are you being intentional about like cultivating the cousin relationship for your kids?
Cousins, oh God.
I mean, So our kids are very, very close. So as Sean alluded, when I started college, he had just had his first kid, and his daughter is now in her 20s and lives in New York, and I mean is so close to my daughter that like they're borderline siblings
Yeah,
depending on the day.
yeah, it's beautiful.
And I think I was a very intentional aunt to all three of his kids, and really made a point even when I moved to New York to be present. And my husband and I have been together for 20 years, so he's been a very intentional uncle since day one. And so I do think for Sean and I, we've really made sure that our kids have a deep cousin relationship. And I actually think in recent years we've been trying to be better with our oldest brother Michael and his kids. I think that cousin relationship there actually probably drifted more than it should have, even with us just as aunts and uncles. And we were on a chain actually with one of Michael's kids last week making dinner plans coming up. And I do think again it's this great irony, right? Sometimes it takes someone passing to bring the rest of a family together. But when our dad passed, we had a memorial in New York, and a lot of the family, some of whom we hadn't seen in 15, 20 years, we all came together for it. And I think we all are trying to be much more intentional about being in each other's lives in a way that, to be blunt, we never have in the past.
Yeah, there's a wonderful moment in the podcast where actually, I'll frame it differently. There's a wonderful moment when Sarah was recording the podcast, and she calls me up from a subway platform and says, "We're from Gambia. We're from Gambia." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "We're from Gambia." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Dad's side of the family is from Gambia. And she found out this information doing an interview with one of our cousins for the podcast, who had been sitting on a ton of family history for ages. And none of us knew because we just haven't talked to one another ever. So it's unlocking literally our family history, this renewed relationship. And a finer point on the memorial service, we made a point. We asked all of our kids so Michael, our oldest brother's children, my children, Sarah's daughter, to speak at the top of the memorial service and to welcome everyone. And it was the first time that they had all stood together. So it was the first time some of them had ever met, and that was a real powerful binding agent, and it was purposeful, and we very much have wanted to set this new trajectory for our family, where there's pride in the family name, there's pride in the family history, there's awareness of the family history to begin with, and that this goes back to what I said earlier about learning how to be a family, right? Because I think we've all been raised to believe that we're all lone wolves, right? We're in it alone, and we got to fight for what's ours, and we all come from these broken homes, and and yada yada. And really, it's like, can we retrain ourselves to believe that we are more powerful together? That this series of broken families and halves and steps and sort of dead end family clues, can we pull all those broken pieces together and create this one strong family that can provide for each other emotionally? And I think that's a new experiment for us, but it seems to be going well so far. And now that Sarah's in therapy, God knows sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit, man. It's gonna be great.
Well, it has been such a treat to learn more about both of you and your family. I know that
Thanks.
people will enjoy checking out the podcast and hearing even more. Sarah, please tell us where we can stay connected with you, and where can we check out the podcast?
You can check out the podcast anywhere that you get podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Audible, Tough Cookie, the Wally Famous Amos Story. New episodes out every Wednesday, 6 episodes in total. It is a great time. And you can find me, hosting that podcast. I don't have a massive social presence, so you can find me there or maybe on Twitter, but I don't really tweet. So I don't know. Just listen to the podcast and find me in the ether.
Got it. And Reverend Shawn, where can we check out your music and any other projects that you have going on?
You can find my music anywhere you listen to music. Apple, Spotify, Bandcamp, Tidal, wherever you listen to music. Probably find some physical copies in record stores here and there. You can find me at ShawnAmos.com, ShawnAmos.com.
Thank you both for spending some time with me today. I appreciate it.
So great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.